What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to The Fringe. Happy Sunday. I hope you guys are all doing well. First live stream back. Boy, it looks like I got a little color on this monitor. Yeah, I'm back. I'm burnt. And boy, what a time we had in California. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that because what a time it was. And I actually have some really interesting information that I picked up on while I was in California, because for weeks now, as I've been discussing taking my kids to Disney and Disney's woke propaganda and the way that their company handles things, I spoke with some staff at Disney while I was there, and boy, did they have a lot to say. And I'm going to be talking about that tonight. Also going to be talking a lot about Justin Trudeau and his embarrassing trip to India this weekend. But let's get started with the chat. Give us a shout out. Let us know where you're watching in from as we jump into this fun stream. Keith Hanna, welcome into the stream. How you doing? Trudeau's Economy jumping in as well. Welcome into the stream. Ram 1500, welcome back in. Trudeau's Economy chiming in again. James Meeker, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Welcome back. Thank you so much. It's great to be back. Mike TV, Disney Alive for another week. Thanks to your trip. They are indeed. My kids are happy and my wallet's empty, but hey, it was a lot of fun. Suzanne jumping in. Great to have you back here as well, Suzanne. Welcome back into the stream. Mystical jumping in. How you doing? Trudeau's Economy watching in from Calgary. That's always good to see. Good old Cowtown, my town. Rhonda coming in from New Brunswick. Welcome into the stream, Rhonda. Great to see you as well. Boy, what a week. I'll tell you, as I went over to California, two things were crossing my mind that I wanted to watch as I was there. And one of the things I wanted to watch was this whole masking thing, because if you're not aware, California is a very liberal style province. They're very left wing when it comes to politics. And of course, their governor, Gavin Newsom, has made no expense at, displaying that Justin Trudeau is probably one of his BFFs. But as I got there, boy, the amount of masks that I've seen as COVID starts to ramp up again, as people start talking about pandemics again, really blew my mind. A lot of employees, a lot of folks at the parks wearing masks, afraid to take them off, even on the airplanes. Saw a lot of masks. But the one thing that I found surprising was an employee that I came into contact with at Disney. Now, if you guys remember, there was a lot in the news about a transgender individual who was a male wearing a woman's dress as a fairy godmother back in June at a store in Disneyland called the Bippity Boppity Boutique. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's kind of like a day spa for kids, mostly girls. I know they do Prince outfits for kids and for boys, but it's mostly for girls, so that mothers can take their girls to this day spa in Disney where they're put in a princess dress, their hair is done up, they put on makeup. It's just to make them feel special on their trip to Disney. And usually, because of the theme of Cinderella and the whole bippity boppity stuff, they call all the employees in that building fairy godmothers. Now, this video surfaced in June of a trans male wearing a dress. And, well, I gotta say that when I was walking around Disney, I didn't notice 1 ounce of woke propaganda the entire time I was in that park. Now, it could be that I was just having too much fun with my kids, but I didn't notice anything being pushed in anyone's faces. I didn't notice anything being shoved around. I know they've changed the whole boys and girls to everyone, things like that. But in terms of merchandise, in terms of the way staff speaks to people or the themes they put out in the park, I didn't really see a lot. But when it came to this gentleman in the dress, I was actively looking anytime we passed that location to see if I could spot him working at that store. Now, I did not see any men working at the Bippity Boppity Boutique. Now, one evening, now typically what I was doing in Disney was, unfortunately, when we left, about 4 or 5 days before we left, my wife has this problem with her sciatic nerve, and she was actually bedridden before we left. Her nerve had a huge issue. Um, we thought it would kind of ride itself. We got some antibiotic cream from our doctors, and we thought that things were going to be okay. But as we landed in Disney, it was very apparent my wife couldn't walk. So unfortunately, we had to rent a wheelchair every day that we were there, and I kind of had to push her around the park. But we made the most of it. We still got our time in, which was good. Of course, it's going to happen the 1 week that we go away. As when we got back, things are starting to kind of clear up a little bit. My wife's had things looked at, and just to keep everybody in the loop, just it looks like a cortisone shot's going to fix it all up, if need be down the line. But what I typically would do, because we purchased what's called their Genie Pass. The Genie Pass acts as a lightning lane to get you into rides faster, or certain kind of marquee rides that otherwise you'd be waiting in very long lineups. Now, we went for the first day, didn't have the Genie Pass, and it was horrendous trying to stand in line for one ride for 30 or 40 minutes trying to get my kids onto a ride. So I opted in the extra $100 for the pass every day that we were there. And that's where they get you. But what I was typically doing was, because the pass was valid all day, we would go to Disney for the day, leave for dinner. My wife would stay at the hotel to try and relax, and also get my 3-year-old down to bed. And then usually if my daughter was up for it, she'd come back with me, but mostly it was myself and my son that would go back, and we'd try to get on all the rides that maybe we missed during the day, or do a little bit of shopping, or just kind of wander the park and see what we could see. Disney at night is a very different experience than during the daytime. And if you're ever in that area, I would highly recommend doing both. Because not only at night is it not scalding hot, but the park's a little more empty because people are watching fireworks or parades or things like that going on in the ground. So typically you can get on rides that you otherwise couldn't get onto during the daytime. It was a great time to hang out with my son and bond a little. But Wednesday, we were at the park a little late in the day, and we left around 8 o'clock. So I kind of went out in the evening. I was up. I was used to being awake at night, because usually nighttime is when I do my work here. So I ended up out and sat down at a local drinking establishment where I ran into a staff member, and we got to talking, and I kind of mentioned to him, I do YouTube, and a lot of people talk about this woke stuff and everything like that, and he gave me a lot of insight as to what goes on in Disney parks. And as a staff member of, I believe it was 8 years that he's been there for, he was very at it. Now, he asked me very nicely not to mention his name or take photos, because of course it's his job that's on the line, and I understand that. But when the topic came up of this gentleman working at the store, a lot of people believe that because the way Disney pushes their media, because of this ESG score of trying to pander to the woke mobs, that this is how they operate in their parks. Now, when this viral video surfaces in June of this trans person working at the boutique, it obviously shows that, hey, Disney follows their policies. And what's happened, and what this staff member explained to me, is that this policy has actually bitten Disney in the tail. Because while they've been virtue signaling for their ESG scores, what they're finding is that over the years, Disney has experienced many staff lawsuits from people saying they're being judged based on skin color, or being judged based on their religious beliefs or their sexual preferences. Disney, at least what I saw when I was there, makes no qualms when it comes to hiring even the deaf. We had a deaf gentleman working at a store that couldn't speak normal. He had to sign when he was speaking, or when I was talking to him, or lip read. So we had to be careful about how we were trying to get what we had to ask across to him. And it was good to see that Disney's an equal opportunity employer. But what the staff member told me is that because of these lawsuits, what happens is that when people apply for Disney, when people want to work there, there's a very rigorous process to hiring people. There's multiple interviews, there's criminal records checks, there's background checks, there's social media checks. They really do a lot to ensure the safety of their guests when it comes to their park and who they're hiring to work inside of their parks. Now, typically, he says what happens is somebody who is trans most of the time identifies as a LGB um, preferred person. So they identify as gay. They get hired, and then what's been happening is that recently this year, because of uprisings of people saying, I want to express who I am, I want to be who I am. These employees have started saying things like, I want to work in the Bippity Boppity Boutique. They're not really doing this because it's what they want to do to express themselves. The staff member told me that they're doing it because of the same reasons that you see the Mr. Lemieux in Ontario doing with the very large prosthetic breasts. That they're doing this because they're hoping that Disney says no. We don't want you working in a store that's aimed to girls because it goes against our policies. And at that point, they file a lawsuit, get a huge payday, and Disney, before you know it, has people that are getting jobs there just to simply cash in and call it a day. If you've ever been to Los Angeles, the one thing I noticed, and the reason I believe this staff member, is because as soon as we got on the expressway, every second billboard is a lawyer saying, call me. Have you been in an accident? Have you been wronged? Do you have something going on in your job? Call me, call me, call me. The United States is very different by the looks of it, especially California, when it comes to people suing each other in relation to how they do it in Canada. Now, am I giving Disney a pass? Absolutely not. But what this staff member has told me is that there is upper management actively working to rewrite policy when it comes to who is allowed to work at what locations and what appropriate attire is. They understand that there's blowback. But multiple staff, including upper management, he says, have voiced their concerns that this is a family theme park and they don't agree with what's being presented to children, what's being presented to families, while still conveying the message that Disney is a family theme park. So after hearing what this guy had to say, I kind of started to get it a little bit. And again, it doesn't mean that I'm letting them skate. It's just, it all starts to connect. That you start to see, okay, a lot of these guys, there could be a lot of people that aren't even trans that are taking these jobs hoping, okay, I'll wear a dress for a couple hours a day. They'll tell me no, and I'll file a lawsuit and get a huge payday. It's the Disney Corporation. Remember, people see dollar signs when they see Disney. So again, I understand that avenue of it. That doesn't mean that I support Disney for backing these policies. However, they've kind of pinned themselves into a corner, because while they preach diversity and inclusion and all these other things and ESG scores, they've put themselves in a position where if they don't support that, then they're skating back on everything that they've been pushing onto the market. And I think it's kind of biting them in the tail, so to speak. So what this guy has told me is that there are multiple staff, more in agreement than the pose, that don't agree with the park's policies. They said that the content Disney creates is up to them. If they want to bankrupt their companies, that's their choice. But when it comes to the parks, especially upper management that have been there a long time, he said, feel that if Walt Disney was alive today to see what's going on in his parks, he wouldn't agree with what is going on, because the park was built to be for families. It was built to be a place for kids to escape reality and live in fantasy. And men in dresses don't really meet that quota. And it's a different vibe from staff. It's entirely a different approach that, again, I don't necessarily agree with what Disney does as a company, but I ultimately agree with their staff that something should be done. Apparently what's trying to be done now is, and the way he explained it, is that there are certain companies that, and he used Hooters as an example, where he said, if you worked at Hooters, obviously the women who were hired to work at Hooters and serve wings and things like that have to have a certain body shape and look about them, because it fits the theme of the restaurant. So they're actually hired as paid actors, which gives them the right to judge based on looks, based on their body shape and things like that. so that they can have a stipulation of rules. Now, in Disneyland, he says that if you work on cast, he says you'll notice that there's no men dressed up as Cinderella at the park. There's no females dressed up as Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. You don't see that in the characters because those people are hired as paid actors. So Disney can be a little more stringent when it comes to how they perceive their main cast of characters at Disneyland. Um, but they can't do it with their employees yet because they haven't retooled their contracts and their hiring process as to how it works. So I really hope for Disney's sake, for the employees' sake, that something is done. Um, the way he explained the work process to me is that what they've done with this guy in the dress is that those staff rotate throughout the park. So somebody who works at the boutique doesn't work there and only there. They'll work there for a day or two, and then they're shifted on to another retail facility where they're given a different uniform and told to wear the appropriate attire for that job. Usually men and women wear the same uniform, no matter what they're doing at Disneyland, if that's the case. So they said usually what happens is, to be politically correct, they'll give this person a shift at the boutique and then move them along throughout the park to the point where they're only in there about once every 60 days. They try to, branch it out as far as possible because, again, they said upper management isn't impressed with it. It was interesting to hear that end of it from a staff member. Again, the more they talked, the more nervous they got that, hey, they're going to lose their job. They shouldn't be talking like this. And I get it. This is some people's incomes. And from what I understand, Disney pays them very well for their jobs. So, yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about. I thought it'd be interesting to report on the stream that what you see on Twitter isn't necessarily the way that the staff feels regarding those situations, and that Disney as a corporation needs to be dealt with, not necessarily the parks. It seems like the parks are definitely on the side of the average consumer. That, at least that's what this person reiterated to me, that most staff agree that the park should be very much safe and secure for kids, that they don't push the woke stuff. Apparently, he said during Pride Month, Disney brings out a lot of Pride merchandise. He says that there's been recent staff meetings where they've been pushing Disney to maybe only sell that merchandise online versus in their stores, because they said none of it moves. The shops are full of them. Parents don't want to bring their kids into those shops when they stock the shops. Apparently, merchandise moves its way about every 8 weeks in terms of rotation out of their shops. For example, right now, Disney's doing their Halloween stuff, even though Halloween isn't until the end of next month. Their Haunted Mansion, for example, was all themed for Nightmare Before Christmas. So you were getting a different ride versus what you normally get. It was the same with the Guardians of the Galaxy ride in California Adventure. It was themed and redone for Halloween. So it wasn't the typical ride you normally get. They're doing their Halloween nights in Disney. So those seasons rotate. My guess is that November 1st, they'll start with Christmas. So about every 8 weeks, that merchandise shifts and rotates. But apparently from about late April till the end of June, when Pride merchandise comes in, they said that's when staff hears the most negative from their visitors, that they don't want to bring kids into stores because of all this rainbow themed merchandise that just doesn't sell and doesn't move. My question for him was, where does this merchandise go when Disney's finished with it? And he says to that, he has no idea. Whether it's shipped overseas and just, retooled for more merchandise and salvaged, or they give it away, he doesn't know. But he said that is definitely something they're pushing in the parks, that, hey, you know what? You guys want to be diverse, but maybe it shouldn't be on the grounds. Because again, this is a kid's place. It's not, it's not somewhere that we have to institute what pride means, right? We can mention it once or twice, but we don't have to have a whole thing around it. Again, this isn't definitive information because it only came from one staff member, but the way they were talking, I bought into it, and I believed what they were saying, because you could clearly see the frustration when he was talking. And it was kind of refreshing, to be honest, because the whole time I was there, I was worried about what am I going to see? What are my kids going to see? What's going to be pushed towards them? Are we going to hear a lot of gender stuff? And surprisingly, after 4 days in the park, we heard none, not 1 ounce, not one bit of it. There wasn't even a bit of merchandise out there that suggested anything to do with gender, anything to do with sexual preferences or woke content. Very refreshing, very nice to see. One thing I did pick up that I wanted to share in Disney, because I was talking about this before I left, was my big thing was Star Wars. I really wanted to get to Galaxy's Edge because I'm a huge Star Wars fan of the trilogy. I will always say the trilogy because to me that's what Star Wars is. The original trilogy. I was picking up lightsabers and I couldn't decide what to get. The lightsabers were on sale. Now, I've often looked at the lightsabers that we get in Canada that you can buy at places like Toys R Us. They are nowhere near in the quality that they sell them at Disney, where you're getting an authentic and very hefty movie quality replica. But I couldn't decide, so I ended up picking up 3 while I was there. And one of them I'm going to show right now was this Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber. This one doesn't have a blade in it because if you're going to put a blade, you actually have to take this attachment at the top off, and it looks different from how the original looks in order for the blade to fit. So I bought this just to put on display, but you can see it's actual metal, stainless steel on these things. They're very high quality. I was very impressed. I was so impressed with. Now I ended up picking up that one, a Darth Vader lightsaber, as well as a Luke Skywalker / Anakin lightsaber. So the one that Luke used in the first Star Wars movie, that was his father's lightsaber. I wanted the 3 original lightsabers, and once I seen the quality of the first one I bought, I had to go back and get more. And I did get blades for those 2 because again, they don't have to be altered to put them in. And boy, was that fun. Disney was really interesting. My kids built droids at the droid depot, I guess you call it. Did a lot of shopping, got a lot of rides, and we actually got with my wife needing to be in a wheelchair because of her sciatic. The cool thing was we actually got a benefit to that. A lot of rides will actually put you to the front of the line to allow wheelchair access. So oftentimes, if they couldn't put you to the front, they gave you a time to come back. So if we got there at 1:30, they'd say come back at 2:15, and they would just wheel you straight in, and your entire group got on the ride, so you didn't have to wait in the lines, which was nice. So between that and the Genie Pass, we got on just about every single ride at Disneyland. And if you had to go for a favorite, I would definitely say what used to be the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, which is now the Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it's called Operation Breakout or something like that. It's essentially one of those rides that's like a giant elevator where it rushes you to the top and then drops you down to the bottom. But this one has a whole theme and movie to it that the Guardians have been, captured by the Collector, and Rocket's trying to break them out. So he's screwing with the elevator. So you're constantly going up really fast and then being dropped multiple times throughout this experience. Of course, they have the Guardians of the Galaxy's amazing soundtrack of music playing, classic rock while you're doing all this. And it ends off by taking you to the very, very top of the tower, where it opens up and you see the entire layout of the park in front of you, where it takes a nice picture of your face and then drops you all the way to the bottom. I'm not one for those kind of rides, but I got off that ride saying it was definitely my favorite. Amazing. It was absolutely an amazing time. And Universal Studios is the only thing that I have a gripe with. And surprisingly, you'd think Disney would be it. Universal Studios was a complete waste of time and a complete waste of money. And even as I wear my Super Nintendo World hoodie that I picked up while I was there, I dropped a couple $100 on merch while I was there for me and the wife and the kids. We tried to do everything we could. We didn't get on a single ride the entire day because it was so packed. And I'm going to have a video this week. I normally don't do videos like that, like review videos or commentary videos on things or vlogging like that. But the experience was so horrendous. The staff were extremely rude. They were all in bad moods. it was night and day compared to Disney. That I went 17 years ago to Universal Studios with my wife on our honeymoon, and what we experienced in just 4.5 to 5 hours at Universal was absolutely atrocious. So I'm going to tell you right now, if you're not going to watch that video this week, um, don't waste your money going to Universal Studios. If you go to Los Angeles, I always thought Universal was the better end of the deal. Not so, and I'll explain all that in that video. Um, no Disney. No, see, here's Joe chiming in. They had customers and Disney didn't. Both parks were very busy. I'll briefly get into what the problem was. So when we arrived at the park, just to get into Universal, again, with my wife's limited mobility from her sciatic, we had to park as close as we could to the gate. So to get gate parking was $75 US. Just to park your car. You get out of the car, walk to the gate, and I asked them at that point, look, we're going to rent a wheelchair. Can I rent it and bring it to my wife? She's having a hard time walking. It's our concern with her sciatic was that the more she walked on it, the more she risked doing nerve damage. And of course, we didn't want her going unless absolutely necessary. She didn't want to go to a hospital or anything in the United States because we didn't know how much coverage we had. So I asked them, can I rent a wheelchair and just bring it to her? And then we scan our tickets like you can scan mine. And they said wheelchairs aren't allowed outside of the park. Okay. But even when you get through the gates, it's a considerable walk to get to where you can rent the wheelchairs. I basically had my wife wait while I went and got it. We had talked for months, and I spoke for months on this channel about the Super Mario themed restaurant that's in Universal. I guess what I'm doing is comparing a lot of it to what you get at Disney. We were at the park half an hour before it opened. There's no way on the app to reserve the chance to go to this restaurant that my kids had been begging me for months. That when we go there, we want to go there for lunch or dinner. I said, we'll get in there one way or another. Even if it's later in the day, we'll find a time, we'll go there. There's no way to book that reservation from the app like you can do with Disney. Disney, you can book a restaurant 60 days out. So at least at that time, if you can't get your reservation, 2 months in advance, we're not going to get in there. But you had to walk all the way down to the lower lot at Universal, scan a QR code, at which time half an hour after the park opened, we were told there's no spots for the rest of the day because Universal was only open for 6 hours that day. And that was my biggest problem, was that most of the rides at Universal had a minimum of a 90-minute wait. So to get on any of those rides and also see everything they had to offer in terms of Harry Potter, Super Mario, Minions, you name it, there wasn't enough time in a day. Considering it takes almost half an hour to get from the upper lot down to the lower lot just on escalators, 6 hours isn't a lot of time. The Super Mario World, you couldn't move around. It was completely packed. It's understandable. It's their newest craze at Universal. But even again, by that time, it was 1 hour after the park opened. There was nowhere to move. You couldn't do it. We literally spent 5 minutes in that area before having a little bit of a claustrophobia moment and saying, we got to get out of here. Videos that you see online make it look so much larger than it actually is. It kind of felt like standing in somebody's closet, like a New York apartment almost. Like there was just nowhere to move. It was full. And I know my good friend Clyde, my friend Clyde, when he went to Universal in Japan, had told me that when they tried to go to Super Nintendo World, they actually limited how many people could go in and you had to book a time to come back, probably for that reason, so that it didn't feel so crowded. Even the gift shop, my wife couldn't get in there with the wheelchair that we rented because of the way they have everything set up. And it's also the exit for a ride, their only ride in that area. So you've got people flooding in and out of the gift shop while you're trying to buy things and move around in a full store. It just was horrible planning. And again, I understand it's the newest thing, and that's not my gripe. My gripe was when you go to Disney, they have what's called the Genie Plus. And that is what I opted into for every day aside from the first day, because I seen how important it was. The Genie Plus, the way the Genie Plus worked is that they have certain rides, their flagship rides like Space Mountain, the Matterhorn, Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man, um, Star Wars Smuggler's Run. All those rides are what's called lightning lanes. So when you get the Genie Pass, you could book a lightning lane. So, like, for example, my wife wanted to get on Space Mountain, and we were standing there and said, I looked at the app and it says, oh, there's a 5-minute wait time for lightning lanes on Space Mountain. So we booked our Space Mountain. We were right next to the ride. Once you get on the ride and redeem that booking, you can instantly book another ride, and you have 1 hour to get to that ride and get on it and use your Genie Pass. And you can continue doing that throughout the day so that you can optimize your day and get on the most rides. You're paying, it's like pay to play. You're paying for the experience to essentially save time. Now, I added up what the wait times of rides were the first day versus how long we actually waited in lightning lanes. And we saved over the equivalent of 13 hours of line waiting by the amount of rides that we got on just with this Genie Plus. Now, the cost of that Genie Plus is $25 per person for the day. When we went to Universal Studios, they have what's called the Fast Pass. Knowing what the Genie Pass did, I asked them, what is the Fast Pass? And they had explained it that it gives you one ride on every ride in the park in the fast lane so that you're not waiting in the queues to get on the ride. So essentially what Genie Plus does. But you don't book it with an app. You just go to the ride and wait in whatever the size of that line is. And when I asked them, okay, so what's the price to get it? It was $175 per person, which is almost double the cost of admission just to get a fast pass so that you can experience what the park has to offer. The staff were extremely rude. I got yelled at trying to take a picture of my son. They have this thing at Jurassic Park where somebody's in a raptor suit and they have a trainer there and you can line up and get your photo with the raptor. Kind of like if you've ever seen with the Transformers on YouTube, they have the Transformers there that do the same thing. My son got in the line for the raptor, and I thought, much like the Genie Pass. So one thing that the Genie Pass offers in Disney is not only do you get those lightning lanes, they have photographers all around the Disney parks that will professionally take your picture in certain hot spots, like in front of the Walt Disney statue or in front of certain rides or theme places. And they upload to your app so that at the end of the day, you can download all those photos or photos that are taken on rides for free as part of that service and take them home with you. So it's a nice added feature to the Genie Plus plan, again, for $25 a person. Universal Studios, I assumed, had something similar, but my son gets to the front of the line and stands in front of this dinosaur and he's happy. And I quickly poke in to take his picture and tell him to smile. And the gentleman at the front of the line says, you got to get in the line. And I told him, I'm not here to get a picture with it. I'm just taking a picture of my son. He says, well, then you and your son need to get back in and go to the front of the line. At which point I said, I'm not cutting the line. I'm just taking it. If you just shut up, I could have already taken the picture and been gone. And the guy basically told me to piss off. My mother-in-law has back issues as well as my wife. She sat down at one point and they were trying to fence off an area and they just came over and said, get up. We're blocking off the area. And she says, okay, well, is there anywhere I can sit? And they said, it's not our problem. This is the way staff spoke to people. And I was right there. And I even said to them, I don't really like your tone because people are paying, like we paid for the 5 of us to go for the day was almost $1,000. So I said, look, again, I'm comparing it to Disney. Like at Disney, even when they're waving people around when it comes to the fireworks, that you can go over here, don't cross this area because people are sitting, we're trying to wave people out. You can stop and ask them, how do I get to this part of the park? And they'll smile and tell you, here's how you get there. Universal Studios, we asked multiple staff where we were going, how to get play, and it was always a snarky, angry response. There was nothing positive about Universal. The problem with Universal Studios is that what I seen compared to 17 years ago was that when my wife and I went for our honeymoon, it was a place to go and experience how movies are made. And they did have some rides that are themed to their movies. They they offered a really good experience. Whereas now it's more set up like every 2 steps you take, there's a store and very few attractions. It's now buy, and consume product. It felt very much like they're trying to compete with Disney, with Knott's Berry Farm, and become a theme park now instead of a movie studio that has an experience. And the problem with Universal, when you look at the sheer size of what they have now, again, somebody said it in the comments earlier. I haven't been to Universal Florida, so I don't know the size of that lot. But for Universal Hollywood, it's not a very large area that they have this park built on in comparison to Knott's Berry Farm or comparison to Disney. They're trying to compete with those guys and they can't. I think that charging people $175 per person on top of your fee to get in, just to experience what they have to offer, compared to $25 a head for Disney. Again, I'm wagering between the two and saying that is a significant difference, and it was night and day. Disney was also open till midnight, whereas Universal was done at 6 o'clock. They said, we're doing our Halloween Horror Nights. And once again, we said, okay, but we've paid to get in for the day, so we can't just stay past 6. No, that's a separate ticket. You have to buy another entry for that. It just felt like a cash grab. And what I didn't realize, and I wished I'd realized, is that all the merchandise I bought is actually sold on City Walk, which is right next to Universal Studios, in their own separately themed stores. I could have saved ourselves the hassle and just went and bought all the stuff we wanted to buy and forgot about going to Universal altogether. Again, my kids wanted to go on Harry Potter rides, couldn't get on them because by the time we would have waited, the park would have been closed. And again, I'm not going to pay close to $1,000 just so we can get on rides. It on top of the rudeness of the staff, it just blew me the wrong way. Again, I'm going to have a video about all of this. Just because when I called Universal and talked to them about it, their customer service basically told me, yeah, we don't care. In a nutshell. Now, that's not exactly what they said. I'll get into that in their video. It just blew my mind from 17 years ago how much it's changed. And when my mother-in-law mentioned all the shops, it started to click that this is all about just getting your money and getting you out of the park. The studio tour was amazing. That was probably the only redeeming quality about Universal, was the tour they've been running for the last 60 years at their lots. And I got to say, it was just as good as when I went on it 17 years ago. But not only myself, but my kids were really disappointed with Universal, and it's a shame. I would have happily, and I hate saying it because I've been saying it for weeks, that I don't like giving my money to Disney. I would have, based on experience, I would have given Disney another day, just from the approach of their staff, let alone anything else. Let me get caught up in the chat. CB stuff Universal. Walt is the best. There we go. Snatch wants to play with a lightsaber. Apparently, lightsaber. Well, Snatch. You can order them online. I recall Universal Florida was large. Well, maybe it is, and maybe they can compete with Walt. Well, you can't compete with Walt Disney World because I've been told that place is massive in comparison to Disneyland. But if you're going to try to compete, you have to have a plan, right? You have to have a way of doing business. And what you have to realize, I don't expect people to bend over backwards. And while I would have been prepared to pay for an upgrade to get my kids onto what they wanted to do, I thought that $175 per person was pretty steep. And not only that, but the approach, it was unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. But that was Disney. That was the trip. A lot of fun. We went to Santa Monica Pier yesterday. I got burned because I packed my hat before we went. So we had a 7 p.m. flight leaving out of Los Angeles. So of course we had the day to do whatever. A checkout time at our hotel was like 10:30 or 11. So we just got out at like 8 o'clock and said, let's go to Hollywood. We'll drive around. We'll see some stuff. My daughter wanted to see the infamous Hollywood sign, and Beverly Hills. We went through there. But then we stopped off at Santa Monica Pier. It was really quite interesting to see the town. And one thing that I will never wish upon is to live in Los Angeles. Now, this is an area of the world that almost has the entire population of Canada inside of it. It is a massive, massive city. And when I say Los Angeles, it's not like Vancouver where I'm just including the downtown. I'm talking like Long Beach, Anaheim, everything bordering around it. This is a massive, massive concrete jungle. Driving was the one thing that I found almost impossible to do there. Very aggressive drivers, and very different from anywhere I've ever driven. I've driven in multiple large cities in Canada, including Vancouver, and never experienced anything like what I experienced in Los Angeles. It's funny because when you're driving, like we took the 105 and the 110, and when you're driving on those interstates, like the GPS was telling me this is a limit of 65 miles per hour, and people were doing like 80, 90 miles per hour, rushing right up this thing. I felt like the slow guy on the highway, like everybody's speeding past, but I'm looking at it going, I got a rental vehicle. I don't want to get a ticket. It blew my mind how people drive around that town. Beaches were gorgeous. The beach over at Santa Monica Pier was absolutely gorgeous. The white sand, the ocean. I would love to spend a day just hanging around there. But damn, was it hot, like humid hot. It's funny because when we came back to Calgary, even this morning, we're still sitting at like plus 25 here, but I'm wearing a hoodie today because I was actually cold after a week in Los Angeles. It's funny how you get used to that heat with the sun the way it is, that if you're not wearing a hat, you're burned in seconds. But what a time. What a fun time. My kids in the end were thrilled. They were happy. They're going to have memories that last a lifetime. And for that, definitely worth every penny we spent going on that trip. Even if I was broke at the end of it, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd be happy. Very interesting place. Just wouldn't want to live there. Now, what's happening? What's happening in the world? Well, Justin Trudeau went on a trip as well, and he went to India for the G20. Took his son with him. Now, I find it funny with his son because, again, this is the same guy who had a statement put out over Instagram that, hey, my wife and I are separating. We would love it if you respected our privacy, and is now using his children as a way of getting sympathy or getting his votes, or using them to pal around with. I don't get what he's doing, but and I've stepped back my claim where when that first happened, I said, you know what? I feel bad for his kids. Fuck the kids. I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad anymore because he's using them. He's weaponized his kids as a way of protecting himself while he's going through yet another scandal. Because again, I don't believe that his separation is legitimate. But he takes his son to the G20 where he was ultimately not only mocked, but severely hated for even being there. And I found it funny that those in charge of the G20 recognized Joe Biden. They recognized a lot of leaders that came there. No mention of Justin Trudeau. India's news outlets, of course, mocking and making fun of Justin Trudeau. Pierre Poilievre having a tweet out today saying that, you know, partisanship aside, it sucks when the prime minister is labeled in such a way in another country. And yeah, I mean, Mystical's hitting it right on the head, because this is what I was wondering. The last thing he needs is Trudeau the third. Which of his children do we think is going to try to ruin Canada more when Justin Trudeau is gone? As we've seen it with Trudeau Sr. and now Justin Trudeau, any of these trust fund kids that are being toured all over the world, whether it's his daughter or his son, I'd put more money on his son entering into politics versus his daughter. Um, but it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that. It's going to, because what I keep thinking is that Trudeau Sr. was my parents' generation. Justin Trudeau obviously was in my time. His kids will be old enough to run for office by about the time that my children start to vote. And I sincerely live in fear that my children would have to experience any world with another Trudeau running a country. Um, People are hurting right now. People are struggling. And I mean, I've seen it in Los Angeles, but it's nothing like what I see here. Um, Especially around the theme parks, there's a lot of crazies walking around. Like the you see the drug addicts, the effect of drugs on the city. That there's a lot of people that are tweaked out, talking to themselves, living on the streets. They're also living in a city where they don't have -30 for several months out of the year, and they're not charged a carbon tax. Um, Canada, even as I came home today, one thing that caught me um, when I was there, when I was in California versus Canada, is their prices in comparison to ours aren't so different when you look at the exchange rate. Um, for example, if I take my kids to McDonald's in Canada, for all of us to get like one combo or a Happy Meal for the kids and leave the drive-through, it's roughly between $40 and $50. Um, the first day we arrived in Los Angeles, our hotel wasn't ready, so we went straight to Disney. The kids needed lunch before we went there. There was a McDonald's right across the street from Disney, so we hit a McDonald's. $55 for us to sit down for lunch, ordering the same stuff we order here, and that was $55 American. So, in fact, when you look at the exchange rate, they're actually paying more than we do for the same crap. And their fuel was about the same price in California as we're paying in Alberta. And I understand Alberta is one of the cheaper places in the country to pick up fuel right now. But what I can't understand is how Justin Trudeau goes to the G20 preaching climate change and how great Canada is when his people are starving to death. Winter is fast approaching with new carbon taxes. 2 years ago, I remember newspaper articles coming out saying that there was a family in Calgary that were living in their house and their pipes froze because they were walking around in snowsuits in their home with the heat off because they couldn't afford to turn it on. 2 years ago. So what's going to happen this year? As costs go up, wages stay the same, and people can't afford to live. It's scary. It's really scary to think about what people are falling into. My wife and I, now over the last year, with the way books had gone and with the way YouTube's turned out and things like that, we've been stable. We haven't had to make as many hard decisions as we did before when it was just a one income household. But we're getting to the point again where we've been asking ourselves, how do we pay for these things? How do we afford this stuff? And if we're struggling after some mild success, how are other people getting by? I'm not saying we're rich or we're up on a pedestal. I'm saying that the success that we had allowed us to breathe a little bit, and now we're getting to the point where breathing's getting more difficult. That when I watch what we've been able to accomplish over the last year in terms of making healthier choices for our kids at the grocery stores, even this shopping trip that I took today, when we get back from holidays, it's almost doubled what we used to pay. That I start looking at things going, we're starting to get back into that zone where we have to start thinking about how we're going to be budget friendly versus, luxury items. And when I say luxury items, I talk about things like cantaloupe or strawberries versus cereal bars. we don't live an extravagant life in my house. I know when you see all these arcades and things that people go, "Oh, well, you must be fine because you have all these things." I'll say again what I've said every time. Everything I do in my game room, I sold my retro gaming collection a few years ago. I'd invested maybe $1,500 to $2,000 in my collection, and I made five figures selling because the values of Nintendo games and Super Nintendo games went up so much that I just decided, hey, I'll play my ROMs that I have on my machines and my computers, and I'll get rid of all the plastic and just keep the stuff that matters to me. But when I sold that collection, my wife knows that I'm a collector at heart. And when I started collecting these arcades, we just put that money aside and said that was money that I grew that can go back into my hobbies. So I don't actually spend any of our family's income doing the things that you see behind me. Um, we don't spend extravagantly in my house. I've mentioned it many times when I've talked about how I want to run Calgary if I win the mayoral seat, that we have no debt in this house. Our credit card is paid off every month. Our line of credit isn't touched unless it's an emergency or it's going into our home to increase home value. And in which case, if we take out of that line, it's paid back as fast as possible. But we're at a point where we're starting to say, look, even with two incomes, one coming from somewhere that had some success a year ago, um, we have to start making some decisions. And those decisions make me really wonder, what about the people that have two incomes that are just basic, that didn't have the success that we had? What about the people that are single moms or parents paying alimony and child support that can't afford to put food in their fridge, that can't afford school fees, that can't afford winter clothes for their kids, while the prime minister's all smiles touting his son around in India, trying to push Canada? I mean, we look at the embarrassment outside Pierre Poilievre's convention this week when Stephen Guilbeault was thoroughly questioned as to why he doesn't push ideologies that he pushes in Canada on China when he takes a trip over there. And all he does is talk about how much money Canada is giving up if they stop carbon taxes. Um, a sheer desperation move for the Liberal Party to crash the Conservative convention. But it shows the hypocrisy that this is a tax that's doing nothing more than paying for the thousands upon thousands of immigrants that we're bringing into our country illegally, to house them in hotels and fill the pockets of our government. The thing you have to keep in mind when it comes to government, we had Jean Chrétien this week saying Canada isn't broken, Mr. Poilievre. Um, and everybody's saying, look at Jean Chrétien propping up the Liberals. Well, he ran as a Liberal. He had the sponsorship scandal. He probably had as many scandals as Justin Trudeau. The difference is he didn't get caught. What you have to remember about all these politicians, they're professional liars for a career. They're all pigs at a trough. And the trough was very good for Mr. Chrétien. These people that are in power know nothing of the struggles of everyday citizens. They know nothing about what it means to have to look at a monthly budget and say, can we afford to eat? Can we afford to pay for our kids? I spoke to a parent before we went to Disney that still has fees owing for their kid to stay for the lunch hour program in school from last year, and said, I owe the school almost $300 and I don't know how I'm going to get it. But my kids have to stay for lunch because I work. That's damning. I don't understand how this is Canada anymore. I don't understand how leaders, so-called leaders, can stand by and say that we're a prosperous nation and feed that kind of bullshit rhetoric to media and expect people to eat it up, when the average family looks at things like craft dinner as a luxury item. It's so heartbreaking. And it's sad. It's really sad. I ran into somebody from Calgary when we were in California that took their kids there for a birthday that were at our hotel, and they recognized me from a spot CBC did on people speaking out against the government, and of course they showed off this YouTube channel. But they asked if they'd seen me somewhere, and then when I mentioned my books, they said, "Oh, I know exactly where you're from," because they mentioned it on CBC. And it's funny because they said they no longer watch CBC and they don't pay attention to that stuff. But when I told them that I was running for mayor, the first question they asked is why. And I said the same thing that I just said. It's the same thing that I just said to you guys. All these politicians, including Jody Gondek, including Naheed Nenshi, Justin Trudeau, Jason Kenney, any of them, they're all pigs at a trough. I have had to make the decision in my house, once upon a time, do we pay our utility bill or do we put food in the fridge? And I don't want a single Calgarian to have to live like that. And if I can retain that seat just so that I can try to alleviate where I can, that they're not spending as much money on useless programs and ridiculous spending, that maybe they have an extra couple dollars in their pockets, that's what I want the job for, because I'm not a politician. I'm not a pig at a trough. I know I got my weight problems, but I'm not a pig at a trough looking for a payday. I'm not looking for, I know Joe just said it, that mayor's a great way to afford the inflation, but I'll be honest, the whole reason I stepped up for that job is to fight for the common person of this city, to say we pay too much and we get very little for it. So we either have to offer the citizens something significant for what they're paying for, or we have to reduce what we're charging them. Because what everybody who works on city council, what everybody who works in parliament, anybody who works in a legislature has to remember is we work for everybody that we represent, and we're not there as celebrities. We're not there to be treated like idols or false prophets or gods on a pedestal. We're simply there to manage our jurisdictions and make life better for our constituents. And that includes making life affordable. I guess part of what shudders me is that Calgary used to be it still is a very beautiful city. My grandfather-in-law used to say, why would you travel anywhere across this country or to anywhere else in the world when you live in one of the most beautiful places in the world? And he was right, because Alberta is gorgeous. Calgary, moving from Winnipeg to Calgary, it's a very beautiful city. But it used to be a booming city where people were happy to go to work, businesses thrived, people who were willing to work got the rewards of working hard. By being able to afford a better life. They were able to have better opportunities for themselves. Companies used to hire from within and promote from within, boosting people to be able to afford a better lifestyle. And unfortunately, the whole country is in a state right now where that's not possible anymore. Marty up north put out a tweet today showing Little Caesars Pizza hiring at $22 an hour. And he did the math and said that's $43,000 a year, which is more than he started out in the 90s as an engineer. The problem with $40,000 a year in Calgary is it does nothing for you, especially with the taxes you pay. $40,000 a year is chicken feed. Based on inflation, based on carbon taxes, based on the average costs to operate. My wife makes close to 6 figures in her job. And less than 10 years ago, we would have looked at that and said, wow, we're doing very well. We can live very well. But 40% of that is tax. And then when you take your check home, everything you buy is taxed. Your gas is taxed. Your utilities are taxed. So you're paying tax on tax. That's a huge problem. And one that people like Mr. Polyev need to sort out when they become the prime minister of this country. Because I'll tell you right now, I've called out Polyev when I've had to. I've supported him when I can. And I do firmly believe he will be the next prime minister of this country based on what I see happening around the country. But I'll tell you right now that while I've also said on this channel that there's no magic switch that can be flicked, if he doesn't get down to brass tacks very fast and have some form of some reprieve, people are going to lose it. And I think what you're going to see is a revolution. People call it civil war. It's not civil war. This would be a revolution or an uprising. I think people have had it with government. People's faith in government is diminished. It's going to be crazy. He'll continue all the liberals' policies. Well, okay, and Mike, I've heard that lots of times. I guess the way I try to think is I try to stay as positive as I can, that hopefully we see the opposite. It's really going to suck for Pierre if he does stick to the liberal policies, because he'll be a one-term prime minister. It's unfortunate. It really is. It's unfortunate because politics, when you think back 25, 30 years ago, politics wasn't this big of a thing in people's lives. In fact, I grew up as a teen being told that it was rude to talk politics, and that who you vote for is something that you usually keep to yourself. And politicians were not treated in a celebrity-like status like they are today. Like today, Pierre Poilievre jets around and there's crowds and crowds of people. It's like Donald Trump, people just flood to see him and line up to take pictures with him and everything. This never happened with Paul Martin. This never happened with Chrétien, Brian Mulroney. It's like things have taken a radical shift to this point where being in office is almost a form of celebrity. And it's not. It's only feeding the egos of these people that, hey, I'm in this cushy job, I can do what I like. Guys like Pierre Poilievre, if they don't get to work fast, aren't going to have a job. But what the alternative choices are, I don't know. Oh, wait, I was trying to get on Joe's there. Positive outlook. The best thing about bottom of a recession with record inflation is that even that doing nothing will yield an improvement. Yeah, you've got a good point there, Joe. And I agree. I think there's the one thing I've noticed about recession is that there's a lot of opportunity for the common man. And this is the time when businesses get started. This is the time when people start to think about how to grow their own path instead of following on the paths of others. So you can definitely see some positives when a recession hits. The big problem I have is we don't live in a place like California where you don't need heat, where you're not charged a carbon tax. We live in a country where most parts of the country are covered in snow at least 6 months out of the year. People need heat. People need electricity. People need clothing. People need food. People need places to live. And unfortunately, all of those things are unreachable right now under this current government and the devastation that they've done to our economy. And I shudder to think what that means for the average citizen. People talk about the housing bubble collapsing, and as a homeowner, I look at it and say, for the average person to be able to afford something, I hope it does. But at the same time, it's scary to think about what happens. Like, what people don't think about is that companies like CMHC and Genworth, they're just insurers of mortgages on behalf of the government of Canada. They can't insure every mortgage in the country. So what happens when everything bottoms out and people say, I can't pay for my house anymore? If you have even 100,000 people at once default on their mortgages, these companies are in big trouble because they can't make the banks whole. So if we truly have a bottoming out and people can't afford to pay their mortgages, a lot of people compare it to what happened in the 1980s. I don't think this will be anywhere near as good as what happened in the 1980s if we truly see a housing bubble burst. I just don't know what's going to happen. Like, usually you can say, well, we might have some defaults and you'll see people build back over time. I just don't know what's going to come out of that. I don't know, because if you think about it, and I always use Calgary as the example, the average home right now in Calgary is probably somewhere around the $600,000 mark. If somebody bought a house tomorrow for $600,000 and next month it drops to $200,000, the market implodes. Even if that person loses the house, leaves it, sells it, does what, I don't care. That's irrelevant. If you were somebody standing on the sidelines and you were told, come buy this house now at $200,000, who's going to have the faith to do that they're making the right decision, that they're not putting $200,000 into something that's going to sink even lower? How do you get people's confidence back that they're investing in something for themselves? I don't know. It's going to be, it's going to be scary. Arthur coming in. I'm an Alberta farmer. I can't afford to take a vacation, let alone Mexico. Oh, somebody must have mentioned, Sun and Dagger must have mentioned something up in the... So farmers have it really rough. I've got family that are farmers in Manitoba, wheat farmers. And from what I hear, it's a huge struggle. Huge struggle. We've talked before about, everybody knows about the fertilizer issues, the carbon taxes, the cost of getting product to market. I like to joke around for a living. Like, again, I work in satire. I try to have kind of a sarcastic spin on this channel, but there's just no joking when it comes to this stuff. And it's just so sad. It's so sad. Keith saying the train wreck's coming. Yeah. Wow. Jumping in, dipshit's plane broke down on the tarmac. I heard about that. And I'll be covering that in this week's videos. There's a lot to discuss. I like to get on these topics with you guys, but I don't want to discuss too much because I like you guys to come back for the content during the week, and that way I don't blow it all for you guys. I gotta say, over the last 2 weeks, what an impressive boost we've had on this channel of people sharing, commenting, getting videos out for views and new subs, and wow. Good work, guys. Welcome into anybody who's watching this stream either live or afterwards. That's enjoying the content on this channel. It's heartwarming to know that people care to see what I have to say, because I'm just a guy in a chair. I'm not Jordan Peterson, and I'm not, somebody wanting to run the country. I'm just a guy with opinions like the rest of you. So it's very flattering that people want to come here and voice their opinions and be a part of this community. I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for all the support, and even everybody watching the videos this week. I understand some of them were a little dated or a little off topic sometimes. But they still worked out, and I wanted to make sure you guys had some content while I was gone. Again, there will be a video this week talking about the Universal experience, kind of a review, and hopefully people come in for the views on that one. I know it's not our typical content. I'll probably have a 2 video day that day, just so that there's more to balance that video out. I just feel that from a perspective for Universal Studios, somebody should be saying how they were treated at that park. So it's more to get that out there for anybody who's going or wants to hear about that. But you guys have been doing great. Big shouts out to everybody for everything you guys have been doing, even coming to watch these live streams. I love having a chat that's very active. I'll tell you, I've said it before. I used to stream on Twitch for 4 years playing retro games. I was happy if I had 10 people in those streams just chatting, let alone the amount of people we get in these streams. So big thank you to everybody who's come out. Derek chiming in, you're a guy with opinions, but you're a guy willing to stand up for your beliefs. That's rare these days. Well, we need more of that. Again, I've said it before. I am just, and even as earlier, I'm a guy. You're another guy. We need more people that are willing to. We need more people that say, hey, that guy's nothing special. I can do this too. But we need to do more than sit on YouTube. We need to actually get up, contact our MLAs, excuse me, and fight back, not physically, but not with violence, but we need to push back on the system and let people know that we're fed up. It's good to all have opinions, and it's good to sit back and say, we all want change. But Michael Jackson said it best, I think, when he said, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. And that is ridiculous as that sounds. I agree with that statement that we all need to be that change. And it's not just voting. It's realizing that our MLAs, that our MPs, they all have offices and they work for us, not the other way around. So we should be making their lives a living hell until the next election. Meaning we should be emailing, calling, bothering them, tweeting them out, holding their feet to the fire. I got a lot of flack for questioning Pierre Poilievre on his statement about lowering carbon taxes. Well, folks, as much as people wanted to say I was making a mountain out of a molehill, I think transparency and clarity is very important in these days. Those are the kind of things we need to be doing. We need to start asking more of our politicians so that they realize that in their careers of being professional liars, their time's running out, and that we're going to start questioning a lot of what they're doing, and looking for answers for everything that they're doing. Which is part of the reason, again, I'm running for office. I don't want to be a politician. I want to be the change. And I would encourage anyone else who is like-minded, run in your own constituency, join a board, get on something where you can make a difference, and start pushing to change the things we hate rather than complain about them. If there's one thing I've noticed, and one thing that my beautiful and amazing wife has brought to my attention, is that I'm a very negative person. And while I've made a good career at being negative, I think positivity is the way we need to move forward. I think it's the only thing that's going to bring us out of this rut, because the more we complain about it, the less gets done. And I think we just need to get back to work. I think we need to just start telling this government that, hey, you know what? We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. Roland coming in very, very good. United we stand, separated we fall. There needs to be an administrative change in bureaucracy. Absolutely. Absolutely. What's my stance on Health Canada banning natural products? I have the same stance as when it comes to parents and their kids and everything else. I think people need to be in charge of what's best for themselves. I don't think, look, I said it during lockdowns, and I'll say it again. No matter what happens in this world, the government cannot stop you from getting sick. So I think when it comes to products, when it comes to what's offered on the market, so long as it meets standard requirements, people have the right to choose for themselves what is best for themselves. I know people with cancer who chose homeopathic medicines. And while they still passed away from the cancer, it was comforting to them. It helped their mental health. And it worked for them. It wasn't for the doctor. It wasn't for their families. So I'm a firm believer when it comes to anything, whether it's um, talking to your children about their preferences or their lifestyles, whether it comes to medicine or procedures, whether it comes to mandates and pandemics. Everyone in this country is born free and they have the right to choose what's best for themselves, so long as they're not harming another individual. And that's the way I see it. That's the way it needs to stay. Um, it There's CB chiming in, the nightmare. I'm going to be Jody Gondek's nightmare. Let me tell you, I'm going to make her life a living hell, and I'm looking forward to the next election in Calgary. I'll be honest, doing everything I've been doing to ramp up the next book that's coming out shortly in the next week here, The Young Kid's Guide to Grooming. Between that, between YouTube, between this mayoral campaign, it's put a lot of pressure on things in this house. And there's been times where I've said to my wife, maybe I got to drop one. Maybe I got to stop something, but she knows how important this is. She knows that it's not just about us. And I've assured her that if it's going to be strenuous on our family, that we'll do this as a team. But running for mayor of Calgary is not a political stunt. It's not a PR stunt to grow my business. I'm going to fight like hell, and I'm going to make sure that I send a message to every other city that you guys all have the ability to run as well, and you should too. If you think it's going to make a difference. You look at what people like Chris Sky did, just stepping up for Toronto to run for mayor and to say we have another voice. People didn't choose that voice, and it doesn't surprise me with cities like Toronto. But again, it never hurts to try. Wayne Gretzky always said you miss 99% of the shots you never, or 100% of the shots you never take. Sorry, I say 99 because I keep thinking of Gretzky's number. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So take them. Don't worry about what everyone else thinks. Just do it. And you might be surprised what the results are. I've lived my entire life being told, you're never going to do it. You're never going to amount to anything. This is a waste of time. And boy, how heartwarming it was to return back to Manitoba last February and have somebody who told me that constantly come back and say, you know what, I'm really sorry I doubted you. And I'm proud of what you've done. To which I replied to them, you can do anything you want to do if you put your mind to it. And nothing's out of reach. All the people that run this country got there on their own free will. They're not special. Anybody here can do it too. So get out there, make a difference, stand up for what you believe in. Anything as small as, like I said, an email, a phone call to your MLAs makes a huge difference. So keep fighting the good fight, everybody. Snatch, you're not getting this is not an extra lightsaber. This is not an extra. This was a very tough decision. Okay. You wouldn't believe, okay, and I'm going to end the stream on this, is that they have this shop in Galaxy's Edge called Doc Ondar's, and it's where they sell all their lightsabers. And I literally stood there for 45 minutes. My wife got fed up and went outside because I literally could not decide which to get. So I came out with 3 and got yelled at. And I even bought one for my brother-in-law because he is a diehard Star Wars fan. But I digress. Snatch, you can get them online from Shop Disney. Go buy one if you need one, by all means. Tough decisions. Drained my wallet, but you know what? I couldn't be happier. Thank you to everybody who came out to the stream tonight. Everybody who chimed in the chat. I'm sorry I wasn't so much active in the chat tonight. But I have read your comments. I do read your guys' comments. Please feel free to leave them. Check out our videos coming this week. They're going to be great. I'm looking forward to bringing you guys new content all week long. You guys stay safe this week. Have yourselves a good week. Look after each other, and I'll see you here next Sunday on That Weekly Wrap. Take care, everybody. We'll see you then.